All right, today we're going to go ahead and learn about coordinate planes. We have learned about these in 5th grade, but we're going to continue learning about them in 6th grade and make them a little bit bigger than what we've seen before. So, the first thing you need to know about a coordinate plane is that in order to move on a coordinate plane, you have to have an ordered pair. So the first number is the x coordinate, and the second number is going to be called your y coordinate. These are written in alphabetical order. They are also written inside of a set of parentheses, and they have a comma. If they don't have this, then it is not an ordered pair, and you technically can't follow those directions. So make sure when you're writing ordered pairs that it's in your parentheses, your x comes first, and then your y, and then your comma is in there separating them. Once we have an ordered pair, we can take that information and go to our coordinate plane. Here are the steps that you would follow in order to plot your point on a coordinate plane. First, you're going to start at your origin. This is where the two axes cross. So the x-axis and the y-axis, right where they cross, that is called your origin. This represents the ordered pair 0, 0. This is at the 0 on what a number line would be. Once you're at your origin, you're going to move left or right using the x coordinate. So right would be moving towards a positive number and left would be moving towards a negative number. Once you've moved on your x-axis, you're going to move up or down on your y coordinate. So if your y coordinate is positive, you're going to go up, and if your y coordinate is negative, you're going to go down. Once you've gone up or down to the correct number, that is where you're going to plot your point. Remember, we need to run before you jump. That means our x has to come first. That goes side to side before we can climb up the stairs. So when you're going to the left, you're going to a negative number on the x-axis, and when you're going to the right, it is a positive number on the x-axis. That jumping part is on the y-coordinate. So if it's going up, it's a positive number, and if it's going to go down, it would be a negative number. Let's take a second to look at what this looks like on a coordinate plane, what our coordinate planes are going to look like now, or our graph, and how we have different quadrants and why it's bigger than it was before. So if we look at the bottom, we have labeled origin, x, and y. So let's talk about this for a second. We have our x-axis, which is where you always start. Actually, just kidding. Let's talk about the origin. That origin is right there in the middle. It is where these two axes cross, and you'll see that in just 1 second. It's the major point of crosshairs. So the x-axis runs left and right. It is horizontal. Then your y-axis runs up and down. So right where those two meet is called your origin. See how the O is circling it? That is where you start every single time. The other thing you need to know is that you are dealing with more than one quadrant. You are used to just seeing this quadrant in 5th grade. Well, we are no longer just working with quadrant 1. We now have 4 of them. It is called a quadrant because there's 4. Think about how many quarters are in a dollar. Quadrant, quarter, they both have 4. The way that I remember quadrants is by making the letter C. Where you start is number 1, then you move into number 2, number 3, and quadrant 4. This isn't as big of a deal right now, but it will become easier and more pertinent as you move up in math. So let's go ahead and talk about these quadrants real quick and what they look like in an ordered pair, and something that you're going to be able to identify as you move through mathematics. So the first thing is in quadrant 1, both of your numbers are going to be positive numbers. Your x value and your y value are both going to be positive. This is something you are used to seeing before. Then in quadrant 2, your x is going to be negative because you're moving towards the negative side of your number line. Your y will still be positive because you would still move up into the positive y's. Looking at quadrant 3, Your quadrant 3, both of them are going to be negative because if you start at your origin, you're going to go to the negative x value and then to a negative y value. So that means you're going left and down. In quadrant 4, we have positive x and a negative y number. That means if I start at my origin, I'm going to go towards the positive side and then go down towards the negative numbers on the y-axis. Before we can start plotting any points here, we have to know what these lines mean. So each of these individual lines. If your graph does not already come with numbers, you need to number your number lines. The only thing we number is the x-axis and the y-axis. Remember, the origin represents 0. So we're going to start on the x-axis going towards the right, and we're going to label that with numbers 1 through 10. Each line represents one number, so we would increase it just like on a number line. On the other side of the origin on the x-axis, we would do the same thing but going negatively, just like a number line looks. We're going to do the exact same thing with the y-axis, starting going positive from the origin. So when we go up, we would become more positive. And then going down from the origin would be our negative numbers. Every coordinate plane needs to have both sides. If it does not have the numbers, I suggest you take the time to write in your numbers really fast so it is much easier to find your coordinates. Go ahead and make sure you have this copied down so we can move on to plotting these points. All right, so if you look back up at the top, if you look back up at our steps that are about like right here on your paper, the first step is to start at the origin. So every single time you want to come back to this origin crosshair, right where your x and your y meet. One way, if it's not circled like this, because it won't be on most of your papers, is to look for the thicker lines. The x and the y-axis are always on the thicker lines, and you know that where they cross is your origin. So we're going to start by doing point A right here. We're going to 8, 4. So that means that I'm going to start at the origin, and I'm going to move, step 2 says to move right or left on the x coordinate. So mine is a positive 8, so I'm going to go to 8 on the x-axis. Once I get there, I'm going to turn around and either go up or down. Since my y is positive, it's a positive 4, I'm going to go to positive 4. On those crosshairs, you're going to put your point and label it the letter that it was given, A. Make sure you put your point on top of those lines. The reason for that is just like when you go driving to your friend's house. You cannot just go cutting through people's yards and driving through people's backyards. You have to follow the streets. Let's go ahead and do this again with point B. We're going to do 5, 5. So we're going to start at the origin. We're going to go 5 on the x-axis towards the positive side. And then we're going to go 5 up on the y-axis. We're going to mark our point and label it B. That's something we should be a little more familiar with just based on what we've learned in 5th grade. Now is where it gets a little different, but everything is still the same. We have these beautiful numbers here to help find our way every single time. So we're going to start at the origin. We're going to do E first for quadrant 2. We have E is at negative 9, 6. So we're going to start and go to negative 9 on the x-axis because our x comes first. Then we're going to go to positive 6 on the y-axis to where they're even. And right there where those crossroads are, we're going to put our point and label it E. For point F, we're going to go ahead and start back at the origin. And we're going to go to negative 3, 5, which means I'm going to go to negative 3 on the x and then move up to positive 5 on the y. Once I get there, I'm going to put my point right on those crosshairs and label it F. All right, let's go to quadrant 3. Both of these numbers are going to be negative numbers because based on my origin, it's going to be a negative x and a negative y. So let's look at point I, we have negative 10, negative 10. So start at your origin. First thing I'm going to move is the x value, which is negative 10. And then we're going to move down 10, or down to negative 10, right here. A little too low. Put our point and label it I. We're going to do this again for point J. Go back to the origin. And we're going to go to negative 5, negative 3. So we're going to go to negative 5 on our x. And we're going to move down to negative 3. Put our point right on those crosshairs and label it J. Now, last but not least, we're going to go to quadrant 4. And we're going to go back to our origin, and we're going to do m and n. So we're going to do m first. That is at 5, negative 4. So we're going to go to positive 5 on the x value, because that comes first. And then we're going to go to negative 4, which means we're going to go down to the negative 4. Right on those crosshairs, we're going to put our point and label it m. And our last point for the day, we're going to go ahead and restart at that origin every single time. We're going to go to 4, negative 2, so I'm going to go 4 positive, and then I'm going to go down 2 on the y value, on the y-axis. Put my point and label it n. Remember, the ordered pair is just a set of directions on how to get to some place. Think of it as how to get to places in Kermit. Kermit is set up like a coordinate plane, lots of grids, the roads intersect, and you would have to talk about street corners and intersections. Make sure whenever you're working with ordered pairs that your ordered pairs have the parentheses and that there is a comma in between them. Not a decimal, a comma. If you don't give directions properly, you're not going to know where to go. So you need to make sure that your ordered pairs look just like they should and just like these examples do. Remember, every single time you need to start at the origin and move left or right first. You have to walk before you can jump, okay? Or run before you can jump. So you have to go side to side before you can go up or down.